I love the fact that I have a property manager. Someone else is vested in this besides me, pushing me, like my success is their success. I love sharing that with someone else because I kind of need that, because I think if it's just me, I'm going to second guess everything. I'm going to want it to be perfect. That's just my personality.
Hi, I'm Wyatt. And I'm Grace. And you're listening to Our Dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Sean Moore, and I'm excited about our conversation today. These are my favorite types of episodes on the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. And when I get to talk to short-term rental investors that are diving into this game, willing to share their story and willing to talk about the journey that it takes to get into the short-term rental game. Today, we've got Shelly Niemand joining us. Shelly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Her and her husband, Trent, dove into this game a little while ago. About a little more than a year ago now, right? When we started getting serious about it. About a year ago. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to dive right in. Shelly's joining us. Trent's not able to join us today. He's a big part of this process and this journey as well. But we're going to go through this, kind of unpack the story and the journey. And right before we hit record, I was telling Shelly, one of my favorite parts about these conversations is a lot of times, our goal is to have people walk into this game with their eyes wide open. We want people to know kind of what it takes, but sometimes it's a little bit more of a struggle and a journey and harder than you think it's going to be in the very beginning, right? Before you dive in, it's fun to go through and talk about that and really unpack, because sometimes we hear these major success stories and we hear somebody that, it seems like it's all roses and sunshine and rainbows. And we're like, man, what's wrong with me if that's not what's happening? And that's really not the game, right? We have to be committed to the process. And, Shelly, I'm one of my favorite parts about yours and Trent's story is just the commitment to the outcome and getting through the process. There's not major issues and obstacles, but there's obstacles along the way that you guys had to go through. And so I want to unpack that and talk about the journey. But before we start, let's talk. I always like to start about, where you're from, what your background is, and what got you interested in the short-term rental game in the first place.
I grew up in Houston, Texas, and then I had the ambition to live abroad and live in New York, and kind of moved around a lot after high school and college. And so I guess in a way I've kind of had the experience of looking for a new place to live almost every year. Moving a lot and living in all different areas in these really fun cities. I also went to a university in Austin, so I'm familiar with Austin as well. Sorry, University of Texas in Austin. I didn't think to say that right. So I guess there's this part of me that just enjoys traveling, from having that experience. And when I moved to LA, it was because my husband lived here. And so I was in New York, he was in LA, and I came to visit him in November. And I was like, whoa, this is so much nicer than New York City right now, because I was freezing. And I just fell in love with California. I moved out here, fell in love with him. We got married. Part of moving out here was just discovering California, because I didn't know much about it. Part of moving out here and learning about California was just doing all these weekend road trips, with him. And we had 2 little dogs at the time. We just discovered all these fun little cities within, right outside of LA that we just love to go to, up north, Ojai, Santa Barbara, down south, San Diego, all the little fun beach areas, Orange County, San Diego, and then the desert and the mountains. And just that was me just really loving the whole weekend trip, right? The whole, weekend trip from LA. Quite often we would stay in Airbnbs or little bed and breakfasts. That was kind of our vibe, was just small, quaint, personality places. And I always just had it in the back of my head, it would be so fun if we could do that. In fact, there's this place down in North County, San Diego, that we love, Encinitas. There's this little bitty inn, and there's 7 rooms, and it's super just the location's amazing, but there's nothing fancy about this place. Bed, small fridge, bad AC kind of. And I remember thinking man, we could really fix this place up. Wouldn't that be fun? This is my dream. I want to be a bed and breakfast owner or a little hotel owner. I would always just say that when we would go there and do those things. So it's just been on my mind for a very long time, just always thought about it. And I think how most people, it's like you hear about someone that does it, right? Like we had a friend that bought a place. It was Trent's friend bought a place in Joshua Tree, actually Yucca Valley, which is the city right before. And every time we'd see him, we like, tell us all about it. Tell us your journey. And we were just so intrigued at this guy that did it. And like, then you'd hear about someone else and you just, I'd ask them their story. I kind of, I remember I had a friend I was telling about, she's like, I always hear you talk about this. And I was like, you're right. I should just get the guts to do it. Yeah. Because it's just, it's just been a dream for so long. As far back as I can remember.
That's awesome. And so and then you guys started, obviously you and Trent started talking about it like, hey, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should, create our own story and be our own story of this game. And so when you was there anything that spurred you besides just kind of was it just accumulation of those conversations with other people? Because that's one of the reasons why I love these types of episodes as well, is I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, man, I've listened to the podcast forever. I heard all these stories. And then the accumulation of these stories just finally said, hey, I'm going to go do this. I want to go figure this game out. Is that kind of how it was for you guys? Or was there like one big moment that you were like, yep, now we're doing it?
There was this part of me that was like, okay, my son's finally in a place where I don't know, like, being a stay-at-home mom, like there's just so many needs on my plate at one time that I just, I always felt like I was spread so thin in a way. And then, I don't know, I was homeschooling for a bit. That was a big part of my time. So I feel like I was finally in a place where I felt like I could take on a project. Yeah. Like my daytime schedule opened up while he was in school. And by the way, that was going to happen. And then COVID happened and all that got wiped away because school was canceled. Right. We were homeschooling. And so it wasn't like all of a sudden it happened. It happened and then it didn't. And then, so I was kind of always itching for a project to take on. There was another business idea I had too. So I kind of followed both business ideas to see what would work. It was like time, money, and then finally like just working towards that and getting the courage to join a group like Vodyssey. It's like it's a little intimidating. You're like, oh no. But there was this part of me that I felt like I've had success in the past where people tell me what to do and I follow the template, just in various things in my life, whether it be like changing my diet, working on a health problem, whatever. Like I do really well if someone has done it before me and gives me the template and I follow it. And I really, and I know some people are better at explaining that than others too. It takes a skill to actually clearly lay out how to do something. And so I really knew I wanted that model to follow. And so it was great because I just, I want to say a lot of people definitely like want to show the red flag if there's money involved, like if you have to sign up and spend, like there's like for some reason, like people really want to put the brakes on when that's the case. But for me, I know from experience, like actually when you do sign up for something that does take an investment and, it helps you stay accountable as well.
It's that first layer of commitment, I always say, right? Yeah. If everything was free, there's such a thin veil of entry that it's really easy to give up, right? And so, when you're invested, and sometimes that is a financial investment, especially when we're talking about like coaching, mentoring somebody to help you along the way, a lot of times, the more money you pay, the more typically the higher success stories that group is going to have. A lot of times because the commitment is larger on the front end from the people who join. So you have a different group of people who are joining. And it's interesting that you bring that up because the psychology behind coaching, a lot of times it's like, man, there's a lot of coaches who love to coach and would do it for free all day long. And like, even for us, there's nothing inside, and inside of our mastermind group, there's nothing that we talk about inside of there that you haven't heard me talk about on a podcast for free or on a workshop or anything else. It's not like we have some secret that we're keeping that if you pay, you get that secret. You're going to get a higher level of commitment from us. But really the success comes from that beginning commitment from a lot of the people who join those masterminds. And like you mentioned, I always say there's three things that you have to have when you're starting something. It's time, money, and knowledge, right? And like you said, you were waiting for the right time, right? When did I have the time to make this, to really follow through and execute on this commitment? are we in a financial position to do this, right? You're talking about this journey requires you to purchase properties, and you have to have certain finances in order to be able to do that, right? You're getting that. And then that knowledge piece is what holds a lot of people back, because nobody's good at anything the first time they try it, right? And so it's trying to really figure out, okay, where can I leverage somebody else's knowledge, and how am I going to do that to help me accelerate the progress, right? But because that's a lot of times we're going to second guess ourselves when it comes to that knowledge piece, but those three things have to line up, and then you start running down the road. And I want to put an exclamation point on when you said, you've been very good in your life of saying, hey, listen, depending on whether it's, health, whether it's finances, whatever it is, if somebody has a blueprint that I can follow, I'm very good at diving into that blueprint. And I can say 100%, like you're on almost all of my coaching calls. You and I have talked how many, many, many times over the last year throughout this journey. And you're always there saying, hey, I'm trying to absorb more knowledge, figure out how I can get around this road, how I can get through some of these challenges. And then you go and you execute, because knowledge without execution, just nothing happens, right? There's nothing, it's pointless. And you go and seek out that knowledge, but then to your credit, you guys go execute, you go do it. If it works, great. We take the next step. If it doesn't, we iterate and we do it again. Right. And so that is, to me, when you have that type of an attitude, it doesn't matter how many challenges come up, you're going to succeed, because you're going to get past them. You just don't throw in the white flag, right? Or wave the white flag and walk away. About a year ago, we decided to dive right into this, right? And start following through that process. And it wasn't the easiest process, right? You were very, very patient and persistent and diligent, especially even selecting the right market, right? You had a pretty good idea where you wanted to go, but even trying to stay patient through the acquisition, finding the right properties. And you analyzed countless properties, right? It was you dove in, and it wasn't an easy road right from the very beginning, as far as being like just everything lining up in place, correct?
It must have been on your course, or somebody said it's good for your first one to be within, I don't know how many hour drive distance. And that was definitely like what we thought too. Like, okay, we want to be able to drive to our first one. And so I wrote down all the areas, and I will say, like, price had a big factor in like us picking the right area.
Especially being in California, right? The whole West Coast is expensive. Yeah.
Like, I kind of was looking at all of the areas, but it just became very clear for our first one, like I didn't want to get in over our heads. I kind of wanted something that it felt manageable, that we felt comfortable with. Looking for a place was, I don't know how, I'm like, is it always going to take this long? But you have to get to know the neighborhoods, and you have to really kind of like understand like what are people looking for. And I think I really love, obviously AirDNA was just the biggest help for that, because I think I saw what was successful, and I just combed over all of those Airbnb listings to just get a sense, like, this is what you kind of need to be successful in this market. But it took a while to get that. And then going there and like really looking in person and like having that experience of like, we would always say to ourselves, okay, it's about the experience. So how do we feel when we get there? you know, like, how's that feeling when you're at the place, and it didn't have to be perfect. It was just like, do we have that feeling that we can make it that way too, and it was very obvious that a lot of the places didn't have it. So when there was this moment in our house where I was like, in the front yard, walking up to it, and I was like, oh, this feels good. Like this, like, I like the way I feel right here, and I like my view. I like what's going on here. And that stuck with me, because when we first saw our place, it was just priced much higher than what we got it for. And so I kind of said, oh, well, this isn't going to work, because the numbers didn't
match. Yeah, they didn't work.
So we kept looking, and we kept looking, and we kept looking, and then we kept going back to it. And we were able to get it in the end. And that was because of the market, because we were in a place where we could negotiate because no one else was buying. It was so helpful to have the experience of Vodyssey, talking to you, having the data from AirDNA, like just knowing, like, even though there's not many people out there, this is still a good decision because of all of the work, all of the background that you teach us to do, all of the the work that you're like, you got to do this, underwrite. So funny how what is underwriting?
Yeah. When you've never done it, you're like, sometimes I make the mistake sometimes when I'm talking about stuff. I'm just assuming everybody knows what I'm talking about and doing. And it's like, no, I mean, but when the first time you're doing it, you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of doing that. But even like going back to how many no's you had to say, how many, like right. When you walked up and said, this doesn't feel right. The numbers don't work. This is a problem. Really just being able to recognize that and understanding where your property goals are, what what you are willing to do and not willing to do as far as biting off on a commitment on finances and debt service and all those different things, is being able to go through that process. And one, it's so obvious when the right one is there, right? But even the right property might not line up numbers wise if it's not priced correctly, right? And like you said, this one that you guys saw, because of the environment in the market, it was sitting on the market for a little while. When it came out, you liked the property, you knew it felt good, but the numbers didn't work, and you had to be patient, and you had to keep looking, and you had to keep, going through. And I remember having a few conversations along the way. You're saying, do I need to change my criteria? Do I need to change markets? Right? Do you remember asking me that many times? And I'm like, no, let's stick with our property goals and let's be patient. But you were like, I'm ready to like move on because this doesn't feel like it's coming together. Right?
I love that you're reminding me about this because I don't remember that, but that's great. Yeah. I mean, of course it's emotional. It's like buying real estate is difficult. And of course, and it wasn't easy, and all the things weren't lining up. And, I remember the one thing you encouraged that we didn't do, but now I see the value in it, is actually buying a place that is totally furnished, that comes like with everything. And I remember I just never thought in a million years like that price would equal what we would spend setting a place up. And it did. You were right. Yeah. It's just a lot of work and a lot of money to get a place set up. Nonetheless, I'm really happy with the path that we took, but I do see the value in that, which was very hard for me to see at the beginning. I think that your first one, it's like the biggest learning curve, right? You learn so much from it. Also, I wanted to say that through all of this, you really those beginning lessons are so important, because I really sat down and thought about who's our target audience. I'm like, we are the target audience. Yeah. I felt really good about that. Like we're trying to attract ourselves, and that made that easy, that part easy. But also it did help me think of okay, but who else are we? We can't just go for this one area. We need to also think about a different group, and that is young adults who are not traveling with their kids, anyways.
When you're identifying who the target audience is, how are you going to create a great experience for that target audience? There is some crossover, but you don't want to be so broad that you're just attracting anybody and everybody, because that's when you just become kind of a bland model home that ends up blending into the crowd, right? And so like you mentioned, I always say that you are your target audience. You are the demographic you're going after, right? Whether it's families, whether it's couples getaways, and we can attract that crossover, right? You and Trent were traveling around and enjoying Airbnbs and bed and breakfasts and kind of checking out all these little areas before you had kids too, right? You were doing this. So you understand that target audience as well, which is still part of your target audience there in this property.
Yes,
and
definitely.
So you're able to set that up. And you mentioned that setup phase and the acquisition phase, and just saying, and I always say, sometimes that first one, they do get easier, right? Your first one, there is a big learning curve. It's the first time you're going through it. That's why I always tell people, imagine not having a blueprint or a process to follow. It's just like you trying to reinvent the wheel in this game is it's a long process. And you want to talk about a really expensive learning curve is really diving into something you don't quite understand, because it's hard enough when you do have a blueprint to follow. And as much as everybody wants to have the easy button and say everything's going to be perfect, that's just not what it is, right? We want to commit to an outcome that's 3 to 5 years from now and build this up to where all of a sudden it really becomes this lifestyle, financial, freedom game and that doesn't happen overnight. And it's not going to happen without rolling up your sleeves and getting to work. And we always have to be reminded of that a little bit. Going through the process in life has a way of reminding us of that. Hey, listen, but also looking back, if it was easy, we wouldn't be as proud of ourselves as we are when it's hard, right? I remember,
that's true.
My daughter, I remember when she was barely little, and I have this video on my phone, and I watch it all the time. And she went across the monkey bars, or I don't know what they're called, the things that the monkey bars where you're
monkey bars.
Yeah, and you hold your hands and you go across, and for the first time, and she was able to make it across, and she jumped off and she was so excited. She said, "I'm so proud of myself," and it was like, because it was hard, because she tried it so many times and wasn't able to do it. And we have that sense of accomplishment when you get through some of those hard times and saying, I'm glad that we went through this, right? I'm glad that I learned that, because next time it's going to be easier. I'm going to be that much more equipped. I'm going to be ready to go. But also we appreciate what we have a little bit more when it was a little bit tough to do, right? And if it was easy, everybody would do it. And so we have to remind ourselves of that as well. Going back to that lesson on acquiring a furnished versus unfurnished, I would say the most exhausting phase is that setup phase. It's short-lived, but it is expensive and it's very time consuming. And it's a short-lived phase, but if you don't budget correctly and you're not organized and you're not able to get stuff, and even the best laid plans during the setup phase is it's a very involved phase, right? When you're getting that property set up, ready to go, launched and everything else. And so, and you look back and you're saying, man, I could have paid an extra $100,000 or $150,000 for a property that was already set up beautifully. And saved myself a lot of heartache. And then that's why I say that be very look and see what that's worth, because most of the time it ends up being pretty equal.
It's true. I mean, because I feel like no matter what you do, you're going to change something. So there's work to be done.
Yep.
But just what you said, I kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into, and I wanted to appreciate our hard work. I wanted to have a blank slate where we can use our creative skills and work together as a family. That's definitely a big selling point of Vodyssey for me, is just, I'm not the only one, you just hear from everyone, getting the family involved is so awesome. And, of course it wasn't exactly how I imagined it to be. Let's face it, I did, it's whoever can do the work does the work, right. But long story short, there were moments where we were all there, my son's helping my husband and they're assembling the table in the back, and I'm doing this, and the boxes need to get broken down so that my son can help with the boxes getting broken, and it was just, and we did it, and that, I just had a vision of I really wanted that, I just think that when we go there now, we get to just see the fruits of our labor, and what's nice is it's there, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
This is going to be in our family forever, I wonder what we'll do for the next one. I wonder if we will go through that again, or if we'll get one pre-done. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting, because now the last 3 that I've purchased and set up, I just hire it all out, right? Because I'm when I think about putting the beds together and moving the furniture and taking the boxes and putting all the light fixtures together, I'm I don't want to do it. But the funny thing is, I was having this conversation yesterday. There's something about me that misses those times, because I remember every setup that we did as a family. And there was times where I'm cussing the screwdriver or something as I'm putting it together and I hit my hand. But then I remember all of those times that are at the end of the day where we all worked our butts off to get these properties set up. And just the sense of accomplishment, I do miss that at times when on the last ones that we hire that stuff out. And so it's interesting. I feel like the next one, I'm probably going to set it up myself again. And then I'm going to say, I don't want to do it again. Right. Because it is a lot of work, but there's something about that I miss. There's just something about just rolling up your sleeves and putting in the work that you miss at times. And even though I don't look forward to it by any stretch, tomorrow, if I, buy a property tomorrow and the setup phase, I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but looking back, I miss the memories of doing it with the family, because that's what we would go down and it would be a week-long vacation. That's a work vacation, right? We're working the whole time, but we're doing it together. And there's, I like that my kids have to do that. I like that we get together as a family and go spend the time. And so it's interesting that we kind of bring that up, because I don't know either. I kind of wonder, I was talking about that yesterday. There's something about me that misses the setup phase a little bit.
Well, I will say we all got hurt. We all have our injury from that. And, but the one thing that, we had a property manager, and that was something that, I was like, should we self-manage? Like I had that thought for like a hot second, but you really encouraged us. And like, we leaned on him so much because it was like, okay, we did one bed. Can you help us assemble the other ones? Because that took forever. And, painting, just various things. He took care of that for us. Yeah. And so, and then we put up all the artwork because that was just something we had to decide where that would go. But, like obvious things we would get someone else to help us with. So it was invaluable to have a local, like, someone that would that local, and that's your local team members. And what I would say, the most important relationship we will ever have as investors is that property manager, right? Is who are you going to be having you help you deliver that experience that you work so hard to create. And that is such an important relationship, but also they're boots on the ground. They've got the resources. They can help you when something needs to be put back together or fixed or anything else. And so, that local resource is such an important part of this process. Even if you're self-managing, having some boots on the ground and the maintenance and cleaners, they're still such an invaluable part of the team that is just, even on the self-management side, people overlook and say everybody who self-manages has that key one or two people that are right there for turnovers every single day or for something that goes wrong. Right. And so it's in our case and in your case, we have our property managers that help us with that. And so
there is one thing that can make or break your success with short-term rentals, and that's your ability to provide your guests with an amazing night's rest. We're taking all of the guesswork out of selecting the perfect mattress system. Personally, I have these custom mattresses in every one of my short-term rentals. We love them so much that we even got them in our own personal homes here in Utah. So visit Vodysseysleepsystem.com and use the promo code podcast. It's all caps at checkout to get 55% off.
So we got that. We got ready to launch. We just went live, right? It's not been too long. It's been about a month and a half. Is that about right?
Yeah. Mid-December. Mm-hmm.
Mid-December on the launch. So kind of the slow time, but not really. It's still the desert. Still people are, you're outside of LA, a major market. I mean, it is seasonal outside of Joshua Tree National Park. And so, but you still have people going during that time, right? And so probably more weekend travelers, not a ton during the week, I would assume. And so tell us a little bit about that first. You're still right in the beginning stages of the launch. Launch is usually 3 to 6 month process, and we're a month and a half in. And so talk about the launch a little bit and like how you feel and like how it's going, what adjustments we're making, what like kind of the iterations, because this is that time right now. You're right in the middle of making a lot of changes and adjustments to kind of figure out what the market will bear and what the market wants, right?
I will say the deadline for tax reasons to get it up and running in 2023, I think was super helpful, because I can imagine if I didn't have that deadline, we would have drug that thing out, because I wanted it to be perfect. And my property manager was like, it's good. Like, trust me, it's good enough. This is looking much better than some other properties I've launched. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Open the doors. He like had the listing before. I was like, I don't know if I even want that listing live. Like he was like, do you want me to take it back down? I'm like, no, it's hard. It was so hard for me to let that thing like be up and running, but I'm so glad he just did it. Cause it's like, we threw ourselves. And so anyways, we got bookings this, in 2023, like that last week and a half of December, which was perfect. And then, so yeah, the holiday travel was great. It was super busy. And then January was slow. And so that was kind of hard. It was like a roller coaster, and so coming on the calls was so helpful to just listen to like, okay, that's how a lot of calendars are right now. Yeah. And guess what? Just February is like, I mean, we are booked. February is booked.
That's awesome.
And March is getting there, and April has like one pretty good reservation. We are actually enjoying it once a month. So there's dates blocked out for us. And I'm so happy about that, because that's why we did this, to enjoy it. And I guess we're trying to understand where it's all going to happen, because it is a seasonal. Apparently spring is a very popular
Yep.
month. So that's obviously going to be our higher nightly rates. So therefore, I think those book kind of last minute is what I'm understanding.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, and we talked about this on the call, but you've got a property that is, it's not a 6, 7 bedroom, 9 bedroom, 10 bedroom property that needs to book out very far in advance with huge groups. It's going to be similar to like my 3 bedroom property in Cherry Log or my 4 bedroom property in St. George, where pretty much our calendar books out 2 weeks in advance max, and that's it. We just don't book out very far. But that the property in Cherry Log is the number 1 revenue property this last year in that market. And so it's not, that can work. You don't have to have it booked completely, out forever. And, and you do have to have that patience, right? You launch your baby, right? It's like, okay, I'm putting it out to the world and I want everybody to love it as much as I do. And all of a sudden it has good traffic. And then all of a sudden in January, we're like, man, it was pretty slow. And like, what am I doing wrong? What do we need to do? It's patience, right? And that's what we said when we have our calls and we talk about it, we're like, you're going to be good. We're looking at the property. It's a great property. Those of you that are listening or watching, you always know that we put these property links in the show notes so you can go check them out. And super fun property with the dome that you have out there that, in fact, my wife we've got one on order just thanks to Shelly and Trent. We've got the dome on order it's actually going in our backyard out by the pasture, by the horses, and it'll be kind of fun to just sit out there. And so it'll be
nice.
Yeah. And then kind of overlooking the pool area, but but you've got the dome out there, which is really fun for the desert stargazing and just hanging out. All of a sudden you're noticing that, hey, listen, we're going to start to gain that momentum and it's brand new. February is booked, March is getting booked, April's starting to, and you're not going to go too far out, but you're going into a really nice momentum into the spring and summer season. And I'm really excited for you guys. The property turned out beautifully. You guys, your hard work shows, and I know how hard you worked, and I'm so proud of you. Like I love being a part of that process, and I'm so proud of just like your diligence of staying committed to the process, even during some of those times where you're like, man, do I need to change? Do I need to do something different? Should we do something here? And it's just really, really fun for me to see it come to life. And so, it's been a wild ride. And I always ask people, when you look back, right? And would you do it again? Like, is it something you would say, yeah, I'd do that again? Or man, that was too hard. I'm kind of a one and done.
Oh, it depends on what day
right. What day we ask. Yeah.
If you would ask me like right after, I'd be like, I'm never doing this again. And then give me a week to get over like the setup phase. And I'm like, I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah.
But I will say I would listen to a lot. And every once in a while I would play some of those videos back to my husband. And what helped me so much was him saying to me, Shelly, get this to the finish line. Because I would get like something wouldn't go right or cost a lot more than I thought. And this wasn't budgeted and yada, whatever. And I would just be like stuck sometimes. And, just like Trent would be like, get to the finish line, just do what it takes. Don't sweat the small stuff. And I was like, okay, that's so helpful. And I think you kind of need it. I need and my property manager too, like, Shelly, we're good, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And so I love the fact that I have a property manager. Someone else is vested in this besides me, pushing me, my success is their success. I love sharing that with someone else because I kind of need that, because I think if it's just me, I'm going to second guess everything. I'm going to want it to be perfect. That's just my personality. And so it's really helpful to have other people just kind of like, you can do it, keep going, you'll be fine. And having examples, oh my gosh, Cherry Log, just thank God I got to like learn all about your experience, what you did, showing that it's a year, you're the most successful property in that area. It's just so helpful to have that inspiration.
That's awesome. And I love that Trent was like, I love that. Just, hey, get it to the finish line. I mean, it's so awesome when you have people in your corner that are like, hey, you're going to do this. I know you're not quitting. You're not giving up on this, but sometimes you just need that reminder, and then you're like, yep, you're right. We're going to get this done. So that's awesome, Shelly. And it's a really, like I said, it's been really fun to watch the process and just super proud of you guys. And so as we're wrapping up every episode, I always have one question for everybody, not put you on the spot a little bit, but I always look back and saying, okay, if you can go back now, know what you know now. right? Knowing the process, the journey, the things that you know today that you didn't know yesterday, what would you tell yesterday's self of saying, hey, listen, this is important. This is something that I wish I knew in the very beginning that I didn't know, or something that you believed that wasn't true, that you're like, now I'm like, okay, I would follow that piece of advice or some advice you could give your younger self.
Of course, I kind of wish we did this sooner. You think that there's a traditional way of doing it because, like, okay, we bought our house and we live, I don't know, like there's a traditional way of doing stuff, but there's also non-traditional ways of doing stuff. And there's a lot of people out there that are doing extremely non-traditional ways that are like, interesting and risky, but yet there's reward from it. So I guess like I kind of wish I looked into it earlier of like, okay, how are people doing this? How are they financing it? How are they finding these properties? Just kind of like getting, because even if you just go down the path, that doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. You can just, you can just get real close to it, and then decide if that's something you want to. And so I definitely think it's real easy to think, oh, I can't do this. It's only for these kind of, or whatever. You have to have all this figured out. And it's just like listening to the podcast. It's really helped me understand that there's a lot of ways to start your investing.
That's awesome. I love it. And I'd say out of as many podcasts as we've done, as many interviews, and as many times I've asked that question, 90% of the time, that's the answer I get is, I wish I would have started sooner. I wish I would have just explored these different avenues to see what was right for me. Right. And to say, okay, is there a different way to do, to get to the outcome that I'm really looking for. And so, and there's a lot of different reasons to do it. Like, we want the financial investment. A lot of people talk about the money and everything else. But one of my favorite things that you said in our conversation was that you guys are going and using the property every month because that was a big reason you bought it, right? It's like, now we've got this property we can go to as a family, and every month we're committed to going and using it and spending time and creating those memories, right? They truly are lifestyle assets, which is why I call them that, because there's more to it than just the investment side, right? While the investment side is important, there's other things that why we love this asset class. But just saying, okay, there's other ways to get for where we're at to where we want to go. Maybe it's short-term rentals, maybe it's not, but explore it and realize that, whatever road you're going to run down, starting sooner rather than later is always a good thing, right? And so Shelly, I'm really, really proud of you guys. This is awesome. Thanks. It's been so fun that you are willing to come on and share your journey and talk about the process. And, because everybody, you're a few steps ahead of somebody else listening now and saying, and maybe they're in that thought process of, I keep talking about this. I keep wanting to do this. And you can be an inspiration to them to say, hey, listen, you can do it, right? It doesn't, like you mentioned, there's people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different financial capabilities that are able to go make things happen in their own lives. And so I always appreciate you coming on and sharing that story and being willing to share that story. Not everybody is. And so thank you so much for doing that. And it's been so fun to watch your guys' journey and continue to watch it. I'm excited to just kind of see where we're going from here. And so those of you listening, we always appreciate your time. We know how valuable it is, and we appreciate you spending it with us. At the end of every episode, you guys know I always ask you 2 favors. First one is, if you know somebody else that loves the short-term rental game or is interested in the short-term rental game that will get value out of these shows, share the show. Those things help us. They help us spread the word, help other people walk into this game with their eyes wide open. That's our goal here on this podcast and what we're doing here at Vodyssey. And that final thing that I always ask you, which I think is the most important thing, is to go pick one thing you can do, just one thing, just a little thing every single day that you can do to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website? Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodyssey.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.